Primarily am in South Asia and Southeast Asia. So, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh for South Asia, and then Southeast Asia, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia. I don't necessarily see so much of a philosophy difference. Everyone goes to the market. I'm going to stereotype, but most people will go to the market twice a day in the mornings, late afternoons to get what they're going to be making for lunch or dinner. So there's regular visits like that. There's also a sense of seasonality. There's a sense of, I want to say, frugality as well. They make use of every part of the vegetable or animal, for the vegetables, the stem, the leaves, and find different ways to incorporate it. And this has influenced my cooking in the sense of, when I went to chef school in Canada and I came out thinking, oh, I need to work in a really fine dining establishment, great to go to a 2 or 3 star Michelin, or, a restaurant that makes the newspapers and the print. And I did experience a little bit of that, but I also learned that sometimes, at least in Asia, a lot of the best food is found in the homes and on the streets, and not necessarily in the restaurants. Things are changing. So if you go to, there's pockets in Thailand and Bangkok that are coming up. You're also seeing a lot of chefs from North America and Australia or England, and some from France, who are moving to Asia. They fall in love with the similar things that I've fallen in love with, and they have decided to set up shop. A few of them are here. So for example, Will Goldfarb, who does pastry, he moved from New York to Bali. And so what they do is their cooking has changed where they see the ingredients and they take their techniques from working in fine-star establishments and high-end establishments and take the ingredients that they're learning about and how they can adapt them into their recipes. So I find that that's something that's kind of changing in Asia, and I think it's a great thing for, when you can save up some money after you get out of chef school. I know you have debts and everything, but save up the money. And there is nothing better than going traveling to really learn about the ingredients, where they're coming from. And you'll be surprised at how much you will assimilate onto you, even if you're only there for 2 weeks or you're there for 3 years. You'll just develop layers, much more so than just being in a restaurant kitchen. So I think it's really important for that. I think a new trend in Asia is actually Asian chefs, and some of the foreign chefs are helping them push them this way because of the philosophies that we have had, is looking back on their own traditions, looking back at the value and the wealth that they have within their own, say, kitchen pantry. I've recently, over the years, met I'd say a handful or a couple handful of Asian chefs who they thought they wanted to learn how to make French or Italian food. And so they went to Italy or France, and then they would say, well, you're from Thailand or you're from Malaysia, how do you make this? How do you make your own food? And then they realized, my foundation isn't as strong in my own culture as it is in French or Italian. So they have then they figured the French and Italian food isn't going away, but their grandmothers and the people who have that traditional knowledge are getting older, and the knowledge hasn't necessarily been passed on. So they're going back, learning from these people, and setting up restaurants. So there is that trend of looking to the tradition. And I think there's a trend in Asia of adopting foods from the neighboring countries, which, they're, I don't want to say insular, but you'd have, if you're in Thailand, you'd have food from this region just in that region. And now people within the countries are traveling. So you'll actually see a dish from one part that's moved to another dish because a community has moved. And typically, those type of things would happen, but now it seems to be sprouting up because, again, the youth are they're traveling more in their own countries, and they want those flavors when they go back to their cities. So I would say those are kind of two big trends that I see. I think it's important for the people coming, for the chefs that I'm helping moderate, to kind of, how do you translate an unfamiliar flavor for an American audience or a North American audience without diluting it to a point that it's unrecognizable, I think is really important. So recognizing that the success of a dish is either through a technique, you know, so it could be something where maybe using a blender isn't the right thing as opposed to using a mortar and pestle. Or it could be, sure, you could substitute that ingredient, however, you're just gonna miss the true essence of a dish. So I think that how do you do that, maybe if you don't have the access to the ingredients, or how do you cleverly do that? As well, I think what's important is, so that's through the food, but then through the presentation, and what I mean is maybe the naming of the food on a menu. How do you kind of rename it again to provide, to maintain the integrity of the dish, of where it's coming from, but without kind of giving it a fun name like calling something so-and-so pizza. It's really not a pizza, it's this, so you have to kind of rename it so that people eventually will call it something like a pizza. It's easy to call. So I think those are things, is how do you do that translation for people who are unfamiliar to it or what they want to learn on the two levels. So from the dish on the kitchen and then onto the menu, so that they want to take that risk and they want to take that chance to try it. So I think that we're seeing more communal eating happening with the shared plates that are kind of, you know, going into different restaurant menus and so forth. And I think, you know, I still think that they could get a little bit better on a, it's more fresh, but I think we're seeing a trend there where some of the unhealthy habits of North America and Europe are kind of making their way there as people become more affluent. So how do they kind of keep that freshness and healthfulness of some of the dishes? How do they kind of keep that going versus going into a different direction of just, a lot of people as they move to cities are losing the skills of cooking, just as they become more middle class, just what happened to us here in North America. So how do you kind of maintain that as well? I think first off, like I mentioned before, travel, how important travel is. Don't forget that you can work through travel, so it doesn't mean that you have to save up your money and then take it during your vacation. You can maybe figure out ways that you can actually go and live somewhere for 6 months or a year. And just how much you'll actually learn, even if you say get into a kitchen that you think, oh, I'm not really learning much, but being in that environment of being in a different country, you're seeing how, you know, the culture of the kitchen is different and things that you can pick up, and then you come back and you say, oh, I really did learn a lot. I think you should also be open to, you know, I was stuck in, I need to work in a small high-end establishment because that's really what the epitome of being a great chef is. I don't think, as time's gone on, I don't think that's the be-all and end-all. I think that you need to figure out when you're in different kitchens, what are the skills you're gonna pick up there? So are you gonna decide, okay, I'm gonna go work someplace for 6 months and a year and I just wanna learn how to do volume. You know, or I want to go and learn how to do the high-end stuff to refine my knife techniques or to refine certain techniques. And then you can kind of place all those things together and then you realize, wow, I can now do high-end volume and those type of things. And I think also just finding chefs who are good teachers. You know, sometimes you're gonna have a high-end chef, or you're gonna have a chef who maybe they themselves are great cooks, but they may not be a great teacher. So I think especially early on, you really want to build that foundation where you can just build upon it and do that. And don't sell yourself short when you're going for a job interview or presentation. Really sell your skills and say, I'm coming here because I want to get better at these skills. And so they'll see, okay, you know what, this is what I'm going to get from them, and this is where I'm going to take them. I think those are important things early on.